1 Samuel chapter 29. David parts from the Philistines. Now the Philistines mustered all their forces at Aphek. The Israelites were encamped beside the spring of Jezreel, while the Philistine rulers went ahead of their groups of thousands and hundreds. David and his men were marching at the rear with Achish. The Philistine chiefs asked, "What are those Hebrews doing here?" Achish replied to the Philistine chiefs, "This is David, servant of Saul, king of Israel. He has been with me for over a year, and since the day he fled to me up to the present day, I have found no fault in him." But the Philistine chiefs were angered at this and said to him, "Send that man back. Let him return to the place where you assigned him. He must not go down into battle with us, lest during the battle he turn against us. How better could this fellow regain his master's favor than by bringing him the heads of our men? Is this not the David for whom they danced and sang? Saul has slain thousands, but David his tens of thousands." So Achish called David and said to him, "As the Lord lives, you are honest, and I would like you to be with me in the camp. For I have found nothing wrong in you since the day you came to me up to the present day. But you displeased the Lord, so it is better for you to leave and go back quietly, and do nothing to displease the Philistine lords." David asked Achish, "But what have I done? Have I done anything since I entered your service until the present time that would bar me from joining the fight against the enemies of my lord the king?" Achish replied to David, "I myself hold nothing against you, but the Philistine chiefs are determined not to allow you to join us in battle. Now therefore get up early tomorrow morning and leave with the soldiers who came with you to the place I have picked out for you. Do not harbor resentment, since personally I have found no fault with you. Get up early morning as soon as it grows light and be on your way." So David and his men left early in the morning and returned to the land of the Philistines. The Philistines in the meantime went up to Jezreel. 1 Samuel chapter 30. David and the Amalekites. David and his men reached Ziklag on the third day. Now the Amalekites had just raided the Negeb and Ziklag, storming it and burning it to the ground. They had taken captive the women and all who were in the city, young and old. They killed no one, but carried them off when they left. When they reached the town, David and his men found it burned to the ground, and their wives, sons, and daughters taken captive. Then David and those with him wept aloud until they could weep no more. David's two wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, widow of Nabal of Carmel, had also been taken captive. Now David was greatly distressed because the people were talking of stoning him, for they were embittered because of what had happened to their sons and daughters. But David found strength in the Lord his God. David told Abiathar the priest, son of Ahimelech, to bring him the ephod. So Abiathar brought the ephod to David, who then consulted the Lord. "Shall I go after these raiders? Can I overtake them?" The answer was, "Go after them, for you shall surely overtake them and recover the captives." David set out with his 600 men, and they reached the Wadi Besor. David continued the chase with 400 men, while 200 men stayed behind, for they were too exhausted to cross the wadi. They found an Egyptian in the open country and brought him to David. They gave him food which he ate and water to drink. They gave him a piece of fig tree and 2 pieces of raisin cake. The Egyptian ate and recovered his strength, for he had been without food or drink for 3 days and 3 nights. David then questioned him, "To whom do you belong and where do you come from?" He answered, "I am an Egyptian, slave of an Amalekite. My master abandoned me because I fell sick 3 days ago. We raided the Negeb of the Cherethites, the territory of Judah, and the Negeb of Caleb. and set Ziklag on fire. David then asked him, "Will you lead me to this raiding band?" He replied, "Swear to me by God that you will neither kill me nor deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will lead you to this raiding band." So the Egyptian led David to the raiding band, whom they found scattered all over the ground, eating, drinking, and feasting because of the great amount of spoil they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from the land of Judah. David fought them from early morning to the evening the following day, allowing no one to escape except 400 young men who mounted their camels and fled. David recovered everything the Amalekites had taken and rescued his 2 wives. Nothing and no one was missing, small or great, son or daughter, booty or anything that the Amalekites had taken. David brought back everything. He then gathered flocks and herds, and the people drove them before him, saying, "These are David's spoils." David reached the 200 men who had been too tired to follow him, and who were left behind at the base of Wadi. These men came to meet David and those who were with him. David then drew near and greeted them. But the malicious and worthless people among those who had accompanied David said, "Since they did not come with us, we shall not share the booty with them. Let each of them take his wife and children and leave." But David said, "My brothers, you shall not do that after what the Lord has given us. He has protected us and delivered into our hands the band that raided us. Who would agree to what you have said? The share of those who go down to battle and of those who remain with the supplies shall be the same. They shall share alike." From that day to the present, this has been a statute and custom for Israel. When David arrived in Ziklag, he sent part of the booty to the elders of Judah, to each of his friends, saying, "This is a gift to you from the booty of the Lord's enemies." He sent it to those in Bethel, in Ramoth Negeb, in Jatir, in Arer, in Sipmoth, in Eshtemoa, in Rakal, in the Jaramelite cities, in the Kenite cities, in Homa, in Borashan, in Atach, in Hebron, and in all the places where David and his men had stayed. 1 Samuel chapter 31. Death of Saul. Now the Philistines fought against Israel. In their fight, many Israelites fell mortally wounded on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines surrounded Saul and his sons, and they killed Jonathan, Aminadab, and Malchishua, all Saul's sons. The battle raged around Saul, and the archers came upon him, and he was severely wounded. Then Saul commanded his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and run me through, lest these uncircumcised men come and stab me themselves, making fun of me." But his armor-bearer did not move, because he was greatly terrified. So Saul drew his own sword and fell upon it. Seeing that Saul was dead, the armor-bearer also fell upon his sword and died with him. Thus Saul, his 3 sons, his armor-bearer, and all his men died together on the same day. When the Israelites on the other side of the valley and those beyond the Jordan saw that the men of Israel had fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead, they abandoned their cities and fled. Then the Philistines came and occupied those cities. The following day the Philistines came to strip the slain and found Saul and his 3 sons lying dead on Mount Gilboa. They cut off his head and stripped off his armor, and then sent messengers throughout the Philistine lands to proclaim this good news in the temples of their idols and among the people. They put his armor in the temple of Astarte and pinned his body on the wall of Bethshan. When the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, all their warriors set out, marched through the night, and removed the bodies of Saul and his sons from the wall of Bethshan. They then returned to Jabesh and burned the bodies there. Then they took their bones and buried them under the tamarisk tree in Jabesh, after which they fasted for 7 days. Psalm 120. prayer for deliverance from treacherous tongues. I call to the Lord in my distress, and he answers me. Deliver me, O Lord, from lying lips and from deceitful tongues. How shall he pay you back, O deceitful and lying tongue? He will punish you with arrows, hardened over glowing coals. Woe to me that I live in Meshech, that I dwell in the tents of Kedar. Too long have I dwelt among those who hate peace. When I speak of peace, all they talk of is war. Luke chapter 23, verse 26 to 56. The way to Calvary. When they led Jesus away, they seized a certain Simon of Cyrene who was coming in from the fields, and laid the cross in him to carry it behind Jesus. A large crowd of people followed him. Among them were women beating their breasts and wailing for him. But Jesus turned to them and said, Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, weep rather for yourselves and your children. For the days are coming when people will say, How fortunate are the women who cannot have children, but have never borne them nor nursed them. And they will say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. For if people do these things when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry? Along with Jesus, 2 others who were criminals were led out to be executed. The crucifixion. There at the place called the Skull, he was crucified together with the criminals, one on his right and another on his left. Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. And the guards cast lots to divide his clothes among themselves. The people stood by watching. As for the rulers, they made fun of him, saying to one another, Let the man who saved others now save himself, for he is the Messiah, the chosen one of God. The soldiers also made fun of him when they drew near to offer him bitter wine, saying, So you are the king of the Jews, free yourself. For above him was an inscription which read, This is the King of the Jews. One of the criminals hanging with Jesus insulted him, So you are the Messiah, save yourself and us as well. But the other rebuked him, saying, Have you no fear of God? You received the same sentence as he did. We deserve the punishment. This is payment for what we have done. But this man has done nothing wrong. Turning to Jesus, he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus replied, Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. The death of Jesus. It was now about noon. The sun was hidden, and darkness came over the whole land until the 9th hour. And at that time the curtain of the sanctuary was torn in two. Then Jesus gave a loud cry, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. And saying that, he gave up his spirit. When the centurion saw what had happened, he praised God and said, Surely this was an upright man. And all the people who had gathered to watch the spectacle, as soon as they saw what had happened, went home beating their breasts. Only those who knew Jesus stood at a distance, especially the women who had followed him from Galilee. They witnessed all this. The burial of Jesus. Then a member of the Jewish Supreme Council, a good and righteous man named Joseph, from the Judean town of Arimathea intervened. He had not agreed with the decision and the action of his fellow members, for he lived uprightly in the hope of seeing the kingdom of God. He went to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. He then took it down, wrapped it in a linen cloth, and laid it in a yet unused tomb out of a rock. It was preparation day, and the Sabbath was approaching. So the women who had come with Jesus from Galilee followed and saw the tomb and how his body was being placed. And returning home, they prepared perfumes and ointments. On the Sabbath, the women rested according to the commandment of the law.